Welcome to Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. We're giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m. That's our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we basically, we come your way at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Sundays and so forth. Oh, we're also here Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. So 9 programs, 9 different opportunities to catch 9 different conversations with 9 different guests. The 9s are wild in this case, as opposed to deuces wild. But we hope that you will listen in at those times at richarddugan.com. The podcasts are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, Player FM, Blueberry. We're on YouTube where you can listen to and watch these conversations. We hope that you will. And we also ask that you, if you can, support the work that we're doing financially. We'd be gratefully appreciative. We have a PayPal account that's there for your security as well as ours. And when they ask for the email address to whom you're sending, we ask that you put in richard@richarddugan.com. That is richard@richarddugan.com. We also ask that you take some time during the decade of perfect vision, to go within listening to that still small voice. We have a very special guest, as always, on this program, as she's returning for her second, I think at least her second conversation with us here on the program. But it's been a long, long time. Dr. Debra Mandel is my guest. I thank you so much. It has been a while. I'm sure that both of us have long stories to share with each other as to our journey to this place and time right now. So thank you for coming back.
Thank you so much. When I saw your name pop up, that my publicist said, "Oh, Richard Dugan has a show to interview you on," I'm like, I know him from 20 years ago when my very first book came out. It was amazing. So it's good to see you in print, and very good to see you in person. Then I know that we had visual. We did not have visual then.
No, we did not. No, we did not. It was on the phone. Unless you were traveling and you came into town and we had you in studio for the conversation, and it was just audio, and that was very nice. This is nice too. I actually do prefer in person, face to face. The dynamics, the energetic dynamics are so much more powerful, but this is the next best thing. And we're certainly glad to have you on the program. We're going to talk about something that we've actually had another conversation with one of our other guests along the same lines, in terms of, and I guess the best way to put this, mother-daughter relationships. And I shared on that program, as I will here, that obviously that's not one of the dynamics that I was privy to. However, I did have 4 sisters and a mother. But I never was aware that there were any real rifts or, how do you put that, estrangement, that's the word. Any more than there was ever any estrangement between myself and my siblings, or my father for that matter. But you've written a book dealing with this kind of dynamic in one sense, Sassy and Rude. Oh my goodness. That kind of, explains our political realm these days, but we're not going there. Her new attitude, and it's a game changer. You're going to be able to dive into the shocking truths of mother-daughter dynamics and uncover actually Dr. Debra's program on helping heal broken bonds and create unbreakable connections. I will share with you real briefly. And I say briefly because I received a comment on one of my programs just recently, and I want to thank the person, they know who they are, who sent the comment, that I do tend to be a little verbose. I say it's an occupational hazard, but we'll move on from there. But I thank my viewer for sharing that, because I'm very much aware of it. It's not lost on me. I've had it for all my life. My sisters, at my eldest sister's memorial a couple of years ago, shared something that I kind of wish my brother and I had had. And that was that level of bonding. But the 4 of them shared one bedroom, if you're ready for that one. One bedroom. And, they either got along or they didn't. And of course they did. And they shared, as adults, they shared about this bond that they had with my eldest sister, as well as the other, with each other. And there is also, and we see this portrayed, Dr. Deborah, in movies and television, the different dynamics between mothers and daughters. And sometimes it can be very sweet. It's challenging, to say the least, that feminine energy, which is much different in its expression between women as opposed to the masculine energy that's shared, if you will, or the dynamic between males. So maybe we should start there in terms of that energy that pervades half our population. And then, of course, that dynamic with it between mothers and daughters. And does this conversation we're having, it's dealing with, let's just say, put it this way, try to keep it simple here, between a mother and a daughter. Talk to us about that particular dynamic as we dive into this conversation.
Absolutely. And first I want to say thank you so much for having me on your show. It is truly a pleasure to see you again, to see you this time after 20 years, and to be able to talk about this. This book is a very important book to me. I want to say that it's not necessarily for a mother-daughter who are now entrenched in estrangement, if you will.
Mhm.
It's really why it's called Sassy and Rude, is because there's still a push-pull. There's still an engagement going on. And that's what's really important, because then you've got a lot to work with there. Once there's a estrangement, then it's probably a little bit of a different pattern. But the mother-daughter dynamic is so beautiful and so rich and so intense. I mean, literally, if it's a birth mother, you've given birth to this little girl, you've given birth. It's an amazing experience. Now, that doesn't mean to diminish at all the mother-son dynamic, or the father-son, or the father-daughter, or the mother-mother, or the other mother, whatever the dynamic is in the family. But there is a very special connection between two women as they grow up. And again, this book is primarily for adult women and their moms. Not so much, there's so much written already for teens and how to deal with your little ones, et cetera, et cetera. So what I love about mother-daughter relationships is that they're very rich in emotion and compassion, but also a lot of intensity, sometimes much more than in a male-male relationship.
Hmm. I know that um, my parents, I can't recall them honestly ever fighting, let alone
Really?
arguing, let alone arguing. Now, I'm guessing that they made a very concerted decision, although it seems to me like kids need to be exposed to all of the dynamics in relationships when they're living in a family. But I think maybe they made a decision that we're not going to fight in front of the kids, or we're not going to argue, because that's not really productive in that respect. I don't know that they were intentionally hiding per se, but I think it was more, there are certain things that the kids don't need to see. All right. Um,
There's the, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, please jump in.
Oh, I would say that there's pros and cons to that philosophy, if you
Mhm.
will. The upside is, sure, you spare your children that developmental experience of maybe intense emotion or something that may sound like anger, conflict, etc. But the downside to that is that also children then don't grow up learning how to resolve conflict. So in every healthy relationship, there's something called harmony,
Mhm.
disharmony, and repair. And if children don't see the disharmonious experience and then the repair, then they're actually, to some degree, ill-equipped on how to deal with that. By the second they go into kindergarten or preschool and they're on the playground and they have a conflict with a peer and they have no skills or coping mechanisms on how to deal with that. So I'd say it's a very positive intention on the part of most parents who tried to do that. At the same time, it didn't necessarily equip the children with a level of knowledge or experience on how to repair in a conflict. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I will say that there were certain experiences they allowed us to have, and that in particular, dealing with death and dying. My mother's mother passed away in our home in Phoenix the day after Thanksgiving one year when I was a young boy. And I have to tell you, I'm glad they did that. It wasn't scary, it was a little odd, when you think about. And of course, then at the funeral in the church, I was almost ushered out because I was just in tears because I love my grandmother so much. But that to me is one of those subjects that we won't get into right now, but it's just fascinating. We're talking with Dr. Debra Mandel, and she's got several books, including Sassy and Rude, Dump That Chump. We also have Drama Queen, Heal the Sensitive Heart, and Your Boss is Not Your Mother. And that's an interesting conversation to have one of these days. I've had individuals in my life, they weren't my boss per se, but they thought they were my father. And I had to stop them and say, look, you're neither my teacher nor my father. Back off.
Yes,
um,
and in that book, I definitely address the your boss is not your mother, and then this underneath all that, when you get into the reading, is or your father, or your school teacher, or you're this, or you're that. It's just really that kind of transference that we create in our relationships with
yeah.
people in the workplace. So very interesting.
How did you get involved with these particular subjects? Obviously, a career choice from that standpoint, but um, a lot of this, and we take a look. I even heard the comment just this morning. I was watching one of these little short videos, and it was commenting. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying I'm not going into politics here, but because this was brought up, this woman was doing sort of an analysis and saying that the gentleman who was chosen to run along with the red state candidate, I'll put it that way, chose the wrong father. That he chose the candidate for the red states, when in fact he should have chosen the vice presidential candidate for the blue states. And I got to tell you, I like that guy. I really like this guy, the governor of the state, and the high school coach and all of that stuff. I love the energy and the enthusiasm and the encouragement that I hear from him. Now, whether this is all put on in an act is a whole nother thing. But I'm sure that even children, daughters in particular, but siblings, sometimes there are instances when they look at their parents and go, I wish I had different parents. Not so much because of, say, an embarrassing moment, but more because maybe of a particular dramatic event, a traumatic event, I should say, that happened. And I'm not speaking necessarily of abuse. Maybe it was just simple discipline, and the child takes it to heart. Maybe it goes to that other book that we interviewed many years ago about, in terms of healing the sensitive heart. I mean, kids at a young age are very sensitive, very obviously pliable, and so forth. Is this part of the dynamic that you're talking about? Where I wish you weren't my parent, mother, father, what have you. That's, I mean, that not only is it, I will say, a powerful statement, but boy, for the parent, boy, that's, unless they're able to put it in context from where the child's coming from, that's got to hurt.
Yeah, okay, so I have a lot of ideas and thoughts and comments bubbling in my head. So
Please
let's see where we go with this one.
expound.
So I do want to share a little bit of context of my own background and how I got into this writing work, and even being a psychologist, as well as what you're talking about. Let me address just specifically what you're speaking to at the moment, which is when a child feels this sense of, I wish you were not my parent. That's a very strong experience. Now, by the way, we come into this world with a level of idealization of our parents. whoever they are. We need to look up to someone, something to hold on to, that, oh, there's hope in life here. This is kind of my philosophy, and then a lot of what I've read and understood from developmental psychology. There's inevitably a time when basically around 2 or 3, a child looks at that parent and says, I don't like you, or I hate you, or go away. Child says that because they don't like what's happening in that moment. So mommy says, no, you cannot have that toy that you want. And the child says, you don't love me, starts pounding their feet and their fists and makes these growling noises and says, I hate you. It's a terrible thing, but it's a part of separation and individuation. It's the way a little one attempts to get to the point where they can develop their own identity. So backtracking here a little bit. So I got into this field very early in my life. You know, when people have guests over at their house and they all say to the kids, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a psychologist. And people would say, why not a psychiatrist? I said, I'm not that interested in the drug component of treating things. I just really have a heart that wants to help people. And I was always that kid who was the one where my friends would come to me, you know, that Lucy and Charlie Brown, or was it Lucy? Who was it?
Yeah, it was
5 cents. They 5 cents. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So I had that heart to me, but also my parents were immigrants. My father was a Holocaust survivor. He was from Poland. My mother was from an area called Estonia, which wasn't Russia at the time, but then became part of Russia. So her family had to flee to Sweden. So, you know, they started out, one of my jokes is they spoke 11 languages combined, neither of them the same, none of them the same. So between the two of them, my parents got married, and then they really didn't speak much English, and they had their children, my sister and myself. They were, I would say, somewhat ill-equipped on parenting, particularly in this culture. So I was born in the States. And so a lot of their own background in parenting, a lot of heavy discipline, sometimes to the level of what might be considered abusive today. And loving in their hearts, but not knowing how to really be parents. So I had a lot of issues with my mom because I was a truth sayer. I was a, hey, wait, that doesn't make sense. Can we look at that? You know, something didn't really line up, then I wanted to be the one to talk about it. So by the time I was an adult, and my mom and I can't say that we were estranged, so to speak, but her last words to me the week before she died was that I was the worst daughter on the planet because I was trying to get my mom help because she was suffering from pretty severe depression, anorexia, etc. And I really wanted to help her out. But at that time, I was already a psychologist, and I thought I had some tools and some skills that might be of value to her, but she really did not want to go that direction. And then she died suddenly of multi-system failure. She had not taken good care of herself. So I had a lot of pain in my heart when that happened. And that's what drove me to write my first book, which was Healing the Sensitive Heart, which was how do we heal from these sensitive experiences that we have that came from wounds in childhood. And then I used many of my clients as information to give for, context for these ideas. And so this book is similar to that. You know, my daughter, she's now 31 years old. We've gone through many different gyrations in our relationship, mostly positive, and I'm very happy. I love her so dearly. But we've had to go through a lot of difficult times. So I thought, wow, I've worked with a lot of mother-daughter duos, and I have my own daughter in this relationship, and I helped raise my 2 nieces. So I think I have something to say about this, and that's kind of what brought me to this place. How's that?
And I have to say that what's interesting is that my parents, of course, raised 6 kids, 4 daughters and 2 sons. And certainly I learned a lot about the appreciation, the respect, the consideration when it comes to women. And that as I was growing up in my later teens and 20s, and I would meet different women and I would hear about all of the stuff they'd been through as children and teenagers. And I'm going, and usually at the hands of men, I'm going, I hate to be a member of this side of the aisle. because we're not well represented by some of these people, the males, that they're not treating women the way they're supposed to be treated. I mean, even just simple, basic kindness, not necessarily chivalry, and so I grew to appreciate, and then of course observe the dynamics between my mother and sisters. And sometimes I would see that expressed by other parent sibling interactions out in the real world, in the grocery stores or on the street or at an amusement park or wherever it was that I was. And it seemed like, for the most part, what I saw, and this was back in the 70s and 80s when I was still living in Phoenix, it seemed like things are going pretty good. Was there ever a point at which this kind of dynamic you write about in your book, Sassy and Rude, has maybe, I don't know if I want to say gotten worse per se, but it seems to have expanded and grown to where you felt the real need that, hey, we need to talk about this. This is this is one of those conversations along the same lines as discussing mental health and wellness. And by the way, I give the COVID virus credit for that, and I'm glad that we're having that conversation. And now we're having this conversation. Is any of what we're talking about here does it have to do with mental health and wellness, maybe at that level?
Yes, thank you for that question. I think, and historically, we go through a lot of pendulum shifts, right? So on the one hand, we're talking about how to sleep train a child, which is put them down and don't ever come near them while they're trying to sleep and let them cry it out, right? And then we go to the, oh no, pick them up every second, because if they're in distress, and you can never spoil an infant. So we have these variations in the pendulum that go from one end to the other. And I think a lot of that has to do with we're trying to figure it out, right? We're really trying to figure out what works. And I would say in more recent times, parenting was centered around give your kids all the praise, all the confidence, almost an illusion of that how good they are. And without ever understanding that healthy self-esteem requires the acknowledgement of our weaknesses as well, of our deficits, of the ways in which we are not as good as maybe Johnny down the street or Sally next door, or maybe that we have some skills and we want to honor and value what those are, but also recognize that we're human and we're not so grandiose that we can do everything perfectly. So this whole era of let's praise our children for everything, they picked up their shoe out, from the sandbox, and it's like, oh my gosh, you're the best child on the whole planet. Well, you picked up your shoe, okay? Like, there's a point where it's coming too much. So I would say currently, I think we're trying to find the balance of how do we praise and acknowledge that for which we deserve that accolade, and at the same time saying, but it's okay not to be perfect. It's okay not to be the best at everything that you do. But where's your heart, right? So we're trying to challenge people's hearts. One of the things I talk about in my book is about, and I really love this, and this is my cute story around this one, is nice, be nice. One of the phrases that we tell our children is be nice, always be nice. I really prefer the word kind over nice, because most people don't know this, but the true definition of nice is pretending not to know. So it's literally put your head in the sand and act as if that's not occurring. So you see something and you want to say the truth, but you're not allowed to, because somehow that's considered some evil characteristic on your part. So my funny story about this one, as we're in a grocery store, my daughter's about 4 years old, and I'm holding her and we're checking out, and there's this man standing in front of us, and she says, Mommy, that man has the biggest nose I've ever seen. And I said, oh, okay, where are we going to go with this one? Because that man was right there and could hear this. And I'm thinking, oh, be nice. That's not nice, right? You're supposed to not know. I didn't know the definition of nice at that time. And he looks over and I'm thinking, oh, this guy could be seriously insulted, or he could play with it. And he played with it. He said, he leaned into her and he said, you know what? You're right. You want to touch it? And she leaned in And she touched his nose and she said, "Hmm, oh, thank you." And it was such a beautiful moment because I didn't need to tell her to be nice because all she was doing was observing something, just as if somebody had said, "That's the reddest lollipop I've ever seen." There was no ill will on her part. She wasn't
Right.
saying anything to be critical. She was simply just stating her truth. So it was at that moment that I thought, I don't know that I want to teach my daughter to be nice. I want to teach her to be kind.
Hmm. Yeah. And you did a number of things I'm sure that you're aware of, and one of them that jumps out to me is you did not turn that experience into something that is oh, I don't know, maybe will have to be dealt with in therapy in 10 years or something like that, or that makes it stand out in that negative way. And
Mm.
I find it fascinating, and again, as I observe the things that I do, how right now we have going on in this country, and have for quite a number of years. This is not exclusively the 2020s. Um, this whole business of name calling, especially online, social media, as well as in the media with the talking heads. And it doesn't matter on which side of the aisle or which subject you're talking about. And you hear this name calling, and all I can respond with when I hear these kinds of things is, how is that helping? I don't understand
Agreed.
how you think that calling this person that name is helping the situation, is helping to number one, it's certainly not being kind. And I would agree with you.
Mm.
I like being kind versus being nice. And we need more kindness in this world. There's no question. But
Yeah.
words, the old saying, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And this gentleman you're
Which
speaking of, he turned it around and he said, no, I'll talk to the kid, and I'll recognize that, yes, I do have a big nose by comparison to, shall we say, the average person. I have a big nose, a big proboscis. And he diffused it even for himself. I mean, he was being kind. But
he was kind to himself, which was amazing, which I loved about that story. And you're right, there didn't need to be a therapy moment. Now, by the way, I do not want to come across as if I was a perfect parent in any way. I
well, no,
definitely had my downsides, and one of my biggest downsides as a parent was that I was kind of parenting myself at the time when I had my daughter, trying to
Mhm.
figure it out, and trying to become more loving. And I had a terrible eating disorder in my teens, and I suffered from depression, and I went through that whole gamut of medications and therapy and pain and shame, etc. And it was hard for me. So I wanted a child so badly, and when I had my little girl, I was so excited, but I was still kind of parenting myself. And sadly, her dad and I were not a good fit as parents. So we
Yeah.
did great when she was quite young, and I made very poor relationship choices when she was growing up, and she suffered as a result of that. And we're still kind of figuring that part out. She, of course, on her own, but also with me to some degree about, what does love really mean? What does it look like? And coming back full circle to your parents, not witnessing them having any conflict. I would say that because I'm a truth sayer, as I said,
Hmm.
I did
Yeah.
have conflict in front of her. And sometimes it was probably too much, and it would have been better kept more quiet, more behind the scenes. So we're all struggling to find that balance, and also trying to attune to who your child is. And that's one of the things I also talk about in the book, is that we really do want to address who is your particular child. It's not this generic thing about all children are created the same way and all have the same characteristics. We're all born different. We have different temperaments, we have different styles, we have different uh sensory experiences in the world.
Yeah.
Some kids are just more needy of touch than another child. Doesn't make them bad or needy. It just means that they need more touch.
Hmm. It's interesting as you were talking there. What flashed is I do remember. Not so much that I was blocking it, mind you, but I always remember the good times, and it isn't that I'm ignoring or saying I don't want to deal with those other times, but what I do remember is any time that my father would maybe do something or say something that my mother maybe either didn't agree with or didn't understand or what have you. And of course, the what I heard coming from her, maybe from the kitchen or the dining room, depending upon where, maybe I was sitting in the living room watching TV, was Les. My father's first name was Les. And it was just the way that she said it. And a lot of times it was followed sometimes by a little laugh, you know, and then it got quiet and they've obviously had their little conversation. So there were those times. I don't want to, it's like, I don't want to call it conflict, but certainly they had their disagreements, maybe their, I'll call them conversations where they kind of were working through things. And my parents went through in the 70s, went through marriage encounter. And I remember interviewing them on this program about 9 years ago. And I asked them about that. I said, why did you come to us? It was your marriage and you guys get to do whatever you want because, well, you were the adults. And yet you called us all into the living room, had us all sit down, and you shared with us that this was something you wanted to do and wanted to get our opinion. It's like, well, why did you do that? You're the parents and we're the kids and we're supposed to go along, as it were, and they basically said that they wanted to show us the respect. They wanted to let us know and see how we felt about the fact that they would be spending more time away from the house and away from us.
And you were children still at this time? Were you
yes.
underage?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So they were turning from a family-centric position to adding in a couple-centric position. In other words, they were trying to underline the importance of them being a healthy couple in addition to your parents.
And I think one of the beautiful things that they shared in the interview that I've shared often on this program is that my mother basically said that she supported my dad's dreams and desires and things of this nature, like getting into computers and those kinds of things. It wasn't necessarily her thing, but she supported him, and vice versa. He supported her. And the one thing that really epitomized it was she said, "I have his back, and I know he has mine." And even then, when in this interview, I was in my mid 50s. That really impressed me. It was almost like, okay, this now I can overlay over all of the experiences I have had since I came into this world and have been living with this family and these parents. And I can see that. I may not have been aware of it as a kid growing up, but I sure can see it now that they did. They did. And they instilled that in each one of us. And I think that that's one of the things that has helped each one of us siblings. I mean, I have a sister who, my elder sister, who, we talk all the time, and she's going through her own health issues, as most of us are in our 60s and so forth. But, we talk about a lot of things, and there are times when I say something to her about my observations, let's just say of my father who has passed on. And the words that I chose, this kind of goes to what I was saying earlier about words. The word that I chose to describe a particular attribute of my father, she got very angry with. Now, she didn't get angry at me, but she expressed right at that moment that the word I chose made her very angry. And we talked a few minutes, and we've moved on. And I said, well, I'll if I share this with anybody else, I will use a different word. Okay. Because there are many, many words. And this is where I want to go with this in terms of the dynamics between, in this case, the mother-daughter. Words have power. We choose the words we choose, consciously or unconsciously, for a particular reason. And the unconscious part, we usually don't know the reason offhand, but maybe later we'll figure out, why did I choose that word and I shouldn't have? Because. Talk to us a little bit about, especially in your relationship with your daughter, as you have grown into this awareness, and then, of course, putting this book together, Sassy and Rude. Have you become more aware of the words that you choose to use? Again, being truthful, not being nice, but also
Sure.
being, shall we say, respectful and considerate of your daughter and where she might be coming from, without dumbing down, or how do I want to put this, sugarcoating the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe that, again, we come from a place of kindness and love, then our entire demeanor and how we're communicating, even that which we may be upset about, can come across in a very different way. So one of the things I really encourage in our relationships with everybody, but specifically in this book about mothers and daughters, is to embrace a level of empathy and self-awareness in terms of self-responsibility. So what are we really responsible for? What's within our power, what isn't, and what can we change and what can we not change, and
Mm-hmm.
how to be mindful of that. So in our languaging, we're trying to talk in a way that says, this is what I perceive, this is how I interpret it, and then this is how I feel about it. So there's no blame. There's no blame and no shame. That's the most important component of this book, is
Mm.
that our relationship may be fraught with negativity for whatever reasons, whether there was any kind of neglect or abuse on that end, to just missing the mark and not understanding one another. But as to adult women, even though the mom is still the mom and the daughter's still the daughter, there becomes this level of, you know what, I need to speak to you in a way that I think you can hear me. Because if I'm just attacking you with all kinds of my own emotional outbursts, you're not going to hear me. And if I want
Mm.
to be heard and I want you to see me and I want to see you and I want to hear you, then we need to learn how to speak to each other in a way that's very self-responsible and
Mm.
self-accountable. So the process in the book is how to understand what those emotional wounds are that we carry forward from our own childhood into our relationships with our daughters. And then how do we repair those by being very conscientious of how we speak to one another? So it's a great question you're asking. Is yes, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me, is a crock of shit, excuse me, in my opinion. That is just, no, words can hurt us a lot. And they carry, sometimes it's the things that people say to us that we carry forward for years and years and years, and how to let those go because they're meaningful. So when we're angry and we want to use a weapon by calling names, as you're talking about in politics, etc., it's not very mature, is it? But we do all get to that level sometimes when we feel like, when our primitive brain is activated, then we're not in our best higher self, and we say things we don't necessarily mean, but can be very powerful.
Yeah, I know that um, this process. I mean, I deal myself in certain relationships that I've had over the years with individuals, and wanting to say things that are, um, I guess the best way to put it, are mean. They're nasty. The words are not real productive. It's like the name calling. How is that helping the situation? And yet at the same time, it's like, okay, I need to back away. I need to walk away, turn away, cool down, and then put this into a context that, as you've basically said, gets me heard and gets the message across that I want to get across. And I had a situation where I had to write this email to an individual because of a situation that had developed. And I got to the point where, man, there were things I just wanted to say. You are this and that and the other and that. And I finally got to the point where I said, okay, I got to keep this on me and where I'm coming from,
Mhm.
and how what happened has affected me. And now that may sound a little narcissistic, but the fact of the matter was, the only area where I put this on this other individual was, and I hope, and it's a sort of paraphrasing from the email, I hope that someday you will be the honorable person that you always were, and you will resolve this, and and so on and so forth. Please do not respond to this email. I am basically saying goodbye because I do not wish to associate with dishonorable individuals. And I basically left it at that. No
Mm.
name calling, but my observation is this person is not an honorable person because they did not stick to their word. They gave me their word that this was what they were going to do, and now they're saying, I'm not going to do that. And I know that one of the things that my sister said at my father's memorial, again, not that I was consciously aware of, but I guess I just knew this, but the phrase they used about my father, he was the most honest person they knew. Well, it wasn't even a question for me, but it wasn't something that came up. Oh yeah, dad's really honest. Dad was dad for me. But they saw him from a female perspective, that he was a very honest and honorable man and person.
Mm.
That to me seems consistent in general. And I know this isn't I'm not making this across the board, that most women, I look at my sisters and my mother, and I could use the same word to describe them. They're very integral. Do you find that in general, that maybe the majority of women are, whereas men, they get pushed and pulled and shoved by their peers to do different things that aren't necessarily quite so honorable?
That's a big question. I love it. We do give a lot of mixed messages, I think, to the two genders in terms of who we're supposed to be to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to think that we're teaching integrity and honor and honesty in all of us. But we do still have sayings like, well, boys will be boys, or boys just do what boys do, kind of thing. We give them a little bit extra permission for quote unquote bad behavior, if you
Mm-hmm.
will, as opposed to kind of looking more deeply into it. So, I'm not a gender expert in terms of the differences between men and women
Mm-hmm.
specifically, but I think culturally, and again, I'm biased to this culture. I was not raised in any other culture but Southern California with
Right.
immigrant European background parents
Mm-hmm.
and a group of friends that are very diverse. But still, I'm kind of biased in this Southern California culture, which is a lot of, men are supposed to be super uber successful and kind of go there in whatever way you can get there. And if that means doing the crab claw where you're climbing over all the other crabs trying to get to the top of the bucket,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to do that. And that's okay. And in some ways, what do they say? If a man says something very harsh and assertive to a coworker or to a boss, that's considered being assertive, basically. If a woman does that, she's a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
So, we do have biases against the same behavior as one being better or worse depending on your gender.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like your idea about name calling and not doing that, because that we do resort to that. I just wanted to say a comment on that. When we feel desperate, when we really want to hurt back, it's part of that part of our brain that's still the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you twice as much.
Yeah.
Retaliatory, make you pay for something, and it doesn't get us anywhere. It doesn't give us any healing. But that's where mothers and daughters often, why I say even sassy and rude, which can sound like name calling, sassy and rude, but it goes both ways. The daughter
Mm-hmm.
can be perceiving her parent as much sassy and rude as the mom may be perceiving her child, just in different ways. Which brings me to something. I'm going to take us a little bit off topic here for a moment, if
Mm-hmm.
you don't mind. I want to
Mm-hmm. No, go
introduce
ahead.
a concept of psychology. So I know some of your listeners, viewers cannot see because they're not doing it on the video. However, I do encourage people to go to this video because I love the background that you have. What you have is what's called, it's a gestalt. And a gestalt, I was trained in gestalt therapy, is the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So what I am seeing with you in the center and the globe behind you
Mm-hmm.
is, am I looking at two lightning bolts or am I looking at two faces?
Two
It
faces.
depends. Yeah, well, but it could be two lightning bolts around the globe, right? So you have positioned it as two faces. That was your intention.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
However, from Gestalt is, what do we perceive as foreground and what do we perceive as background? And that's a really key feature in
Mm.
relationships, because how we get to the feelings that we have are based on our interpretation of that which we see. If we see something as foreground, when someone else sees that as background, we're going to have a conflict. When a couple walks into my office and I say to them, by the way, close your eyes, and what are the 5 things that stood out for you in my office, which I don't have anymore, no office since COVID. They report different things. I said, okay, here's some of the fundamental basis of why the two of you have conflict. You don't look at the situation the same way. Well, mothers and daughters, when they get to that place of adulthood, they're not looking at their lives in the same way. Mom may perceive that she was the overly nice mom, the nice mom, right? Just ignored everything, was always giving, indulging, etc. And the daughter thinks, gosh, you didn't have a life of your own. You put too much pressure on me. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do. You want me around all the time. I don't want to be around you. I want my space. I want independence, or whatever form that takes, why there becomes this rift. So a lot of it has to do with this gestalt. It's the perception, what's foreground and what's background. You look like you had a light bulb going off in your head when I said that.
Yeah, well, it's a story that my brother told at my father's memorial that none of us knew about. And it was a great story. And it wasn't something that we expected, but it was like, wow, talk about different perspective. And the story simply is my brother was being taught by my father at a very young age how to change the oil in the car. Okay. My father did the maintenance on the car, but he never drove, couldn't because of his vision. So he's teaching my brother how to change the oil and going through the process. And they go through the whole thing, and everything's fine, and it's taken care of, and they're done. So one day down the road, I don't know, 5,000 miles later, my father says to my brother, hey, if it's time to change the oil, you want to go do it? Sure. Okay. So my brother goes out there and he begins to do the process, and he gets under the car and he puts the pan under there, removes the plug and drains the oil, and he gets back out from under the car and he gets the little wrench to remove the filter and puts a new filter in. And then he gets up top and he takes the oil cap off of the spout, and he pours what was it, like 4 quarts, I guess back then it was 4 quarts of oil into the car. Unfortunately, he forgot to put the plug back in. So now there's oil all over the carport. And my brother, in his comments, he says, I thought Dad was going to kill me. And my dad came out and he says, how's it going? And he looks down. He said, what happened? He said, he told him. He said, okay, well, we'll move the car back out and we'll clean this up. We'll pull it back in and we'll put more oil in. And they got it all fixed up and everything was fine. And my dad didn't kill him because my dad knew, and this is just from what my brother shared in the story, my dad knew that my brother was learning. And he will never forget, if he ever changes the oil again, he'll never forget to put the plug back in again. That's one of the reasons why I do not consider people making mistakes. All right. I don't call them that. I call them life lessons or learning experiences. Yeah. One of the two. Because first of all, there's no judgment. All right. Mm-hmm. You learn, and many people have used this example of Edison. He found over 900 ways the light bulb didn't work. They weren't mistakes. That was the process.
Sure.
So how about talking about that as we are here in the last couple of minutes about this aspect of both parents and children in this dynamic we're talking about in reference to your book, Sassy and Rude, Her New Attitude, which of course is available on Amazon, and also through her website, Debra Mandel, Dr. Debra Mandel's website, Dr. Debra Online, that's Debraonline.com. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective, speaking of perspectives, on calling them mistakes or sin, or whatever negative term you want to use, versus life lessons or learning experiences.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, for sure. I think we want to understand that. I say mistakes, but I say it not with a judgment at all, but
Right,
with
right.
in the same context, right? But of course,
Mhm.
that one word could have a different meaning to someone. So I have no intention of having people feel bad about themselves in any way, but I really want to encourage people to take a look at the things that like all the ways in which great discoveries are made is through trial and error, that something works, something doesn't work, and we go back to the drawing board. So the most important feature of my book, I think, is bringing hope to a relationship that seems like it's just riddled with conflict and is not going to be able to be resolved. And I create what's called a healing tree. And what goes into that healing tree is literally creating a new fertile ground for seeds to grow and develop a new relationship. It's not necessarily fixing, if you will, as if the old relationship was broken, but instead it's just trying to create something that's much more fertile and much more loving and much more gentle to allow for that next phase of development in a daughter's life to be meaningful with her own mom. Because I think most daughters really do want that yummy relationship with their mom, because there
Mhm.
is something special and just delightful about that. I know I wanted that so badly for my own mom, but I wasn't able to get that with her.
Mhm.
And I know that my daughter really wants that from me. So we're just trying to figure it out, just trying to see, I actually wrote the proposal for this book when my daughter was 19 years old. So we've come a long way. She's 31 now. It was one of those sleeper proposals that went into my agent's backlog. And one day she was having lunch with an editor who said, "Show me something else you got. I don't like what you brought me." And she says, "Oh, I have this title," which was called "Why Is She Such a Bitch" at the time.
Mhm.
And, and I said, "Oh, I love that." But they didn't want bitch in the title. So we did have to change that. So full circle again, what's the message here? The message is it's a tough love guide for moms on how to bring back the sugar and spice and their maybe not so nice adult daughter right now. And
Mhm.
again, that word nice, but it's a
Mm.
common word that people use. So I really want to bring hope and love to that relationship so that moms and daughters can heal and have that journey of when the daughter maybe has a marriage and wants to talk to her mom about some relationship advice, or has a child herself, or has a new career, or is moving to a different part of the country. There's all kinds of life transitions that it'd be lovely to have that woman who maybe gave birth to you, or at least raised you, or however that was, or adopted, or whatever, who loved you with her
Mm.
heart beyond belief.
Dr. Debra Mandel, I want to thank you so much for being a part of Tell Me Your Story, the work that we are doing here to find those new ways of living. We look around and the old ways don't work. It's pretty obvious and evident. So we're looking for those new ways. And I think you found some new ways, which they might be considered old ways too. But I think it's just opening one's heart and doing that. And we thank you for sharing with us Sassy and Rude, her new attitude.
Please pick up a copy at Amazon or any of your favorite booksellers. And I always love feedback. So if you find the book and you find it useful or not useful, give me feedback. Send me a note. I love that.
Absolutely. I do have three final questions that I ask all of my guests. I've been doing that for nearly 17 years on this program, and I'm going to ask those of you. But first, I want to thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World, where we are giving you choices and knowledge of those choices to help make your dreams come true. We're here on Sundays at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., Monday mornings at 1 a.m., Wednesdays at 9 a.m., and Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m. Wednesdays, by the way, at 9 is our special edition of Tell Me Your Story. And we stream live at those times at richarddugan.com. We also are on SoundCloud, iTunes, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher. We're on YouTube as well, where you can watch these conversations and you can see the faces or lightning bolts behind me on the program. And we also ask that if you can support the work we're doing here financially, we would be so grateful. We have a PayPal account. It is there for your security as well as ours. When they ask you to whom are you sending, please put in the email address richard@richarddugan.com. That's richard@richarddugan.com. And we thank you, thank you, thank you for those who have helped in the past and those who will support and help us out in the future. We also ask that you take time during this decade of perfect vision to spend some time going within and listening to that still small voice. With all of that being said, as we wrap up this particular edition of Tell Me Your Story, we go to our three final questions. And the first of those is, who is Debra Mandel?
Uh, okay. Who is Debra Mandel? Let's see. Debra Mandel is a caring, loving soul who wants better for the world and for all the people around me.
Hmm. What gets you up in the morning?
A brighter outlook of what today can bring.
And finally, what was your best day?
My best day in my whole life. Oh my. How much more time do we have? I think we're running out of time. I think every day is my best day when I get to the end of the day and I feel like I did something good in the world.
Well, Dr. Debra Mandel, I thank you for joining us again. It's great to have you back on the program and to see you again and have this particular conversation. And we'd love to have you back to dive into some of the other work that you've done since the last time we had you on the program. You've written several books since then, and we'd love to talk about that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.
And thank you for listening to and watching Tell Me Your Story. And until our next broadcast, podcast, videocast, love to Lal. Jeanette, I'm still listening. Dad, continue to be happy because I am. Smokey, I'll see you on the other side. And to my dear friend Zorro, aho, aho.